All right, Eric Stromquist back at RealComm Live. I got some old friends here. Rob Murchison.
How's it going?
Shircliff, Intelligent Buildings.
Howdy.
Great to see you guys, man.
Great to see you, Eric.
Yes, it's been a while, actually, since before COVID. So lots has changed. Tell me what's going on with you guys.
There's a lot going on. There's in this world that we're in today, there's a lot of change happening, right? Yeah. There's a lot of change. We're seeing three things, right? We got financial turbulence, we got a shift in occupant demand, and we got this three-letter acronym that no one talked about before the pandemic called ESG.
So that's a lot to contend with, isn't it?
It's a lot to contend with.
You don't get out of the house a lot, so you might not have been aware of that.
Yeah, my wife keeps me locked up in the basement because of fiscal irresponsibility. So yeah, I know all about the financial turbulence. So, but Tom, so how have you guys adapted the business for this?
Well, we've gone more towards outcomes for customers. I mean, you know the path of all of this conference and the technology. In the beginning, everybody talked about technology, right? And what can we do with it? It was cool and new and exciting. Then we kind of moved into use cases. Okay, what are the things that happen with the technology? And now, and especially because of what Rob said, they really want to have an outcome conversation, and not only conversation, but even contracts. Like, don't give me all the components. Get me cybersecurity. Get me net zero. And so we really become much more outcome focused.
I'd sort of add to that, and you know, we've been in business. We've seen a lot of stuff. We've been in business 2 decades. And when we first started out, we weren't called Intelligent Buildings. I mean, that was one of the first little partner things. I said, hey, Tom, I don't know, we're going to spend $5,000 on this intelligentbuildings.com thing. And now it's the name of a space, right?
Yes, and we were going to finance it if we had to.
Yeah, we're going to finance it.
So hang on, well, you just got to ask, what were you going to call it before Intelligent Buildings?
That's not important.
Oh, can I tell them?
No, you can't.
Can I? No. We were going to be called Utility 4.
Got a little scandal going on up here. RealComm Live, pay attention.
So
secrets are being revealed.
So what my point is, there, Eric, is that we've seen a lot happen in 20 years.
Yeah.
And up until this 3-letter acronym ESG, this smart buildings thing was optional. Now it's a requirement, and it's becoming that way in more and more parts of the world.
Now I'm assuming because Tom, you got to get the data, right? You got to provide the reports. You got to show you're complying. Is that something that you guys help people do?
We do, and I'm just going to make another point of what Rob said there about the ESG is, as he said, it's not optional, but it also takes everything that we have all known and been doing for 20 years and then some.
Right.
So, and it does start with the data as a foundational component of it.
Okay. So it seems like, I've always known you guys as being able to bring the different players in an organization together and get them on the same page. But it seems like now, and then whatever technology they were using, you just made sure everybody played nicely. But it seems like now you guys are taking responsibility, and so a customer can come to you and you guys can do all this for them. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, so what you said is important. We've spent a lot of time over the years getting the customer aligned, their internal alignment, and that is getting much better than it used to be, especially with ESG. They've used an ESG director, they have carbon goals and that kind of thing. And yeah, to your point, now we're taking all of the components that it takes to decarbonize the building, the technology, the solutions, the incentives, the financing, and the business model, and delivering them an outcome model.
Yeah, well, one of the things, talking to you guys before we came on stage, I know a lot of people probably think of ESG, well, this is going to be a cost, right? And it seems like the way you guys are talking about doing, instead of being a cost, it could even become a profit center. Is that accurate?
It is, and Rob spends a lot of time looking at the regulatory side of it. So there's profit center and cost are two things. One, we've got a business model that can create a profitable way of doing it. But on the other side, is that if you don't do it in many U.S. cities and in the EU and other places, you're going to pay. In some cases, we know customers are facing millions of dollars in fines. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, and I'm sure the audience has seen a lot of this stuff, but just to frame this up for a second. When we talk about decarbonization, there's 3 scopes. There's scope 3, which is the supply chain. There's scope 2, which is the indirect, and where a lot of the activity has been around buying energy. And there's scope 1. Scope 1 is what happens inside those 4 walls of those buildings. And all the firms that we're looking at here are talking, a lot of them, at least on the IBCon side, are looking at the technologies inside those buildings. But the question is, if you're going to make an investment, an additional investment that you have on an asset that may have depreciated in value, are you going to guarantee me an outcome? And it all starts with having the building connected so you can see the data. So what we have been able to do through our 20 years of, as Jim Young would say, looking in the mezzanine down the whole industry here, is that it starts with getting the building connected so that we can get that data out of that building in a secure way at a very cost-effective, no CapEx requirement. And then we have an ecosystem around us that we have gotten to know over the last 20 years that we can introduce and coordinate so that we can guarantee those outcomes.
Well, you guys, obviously, this is not your first rodeo. You guys have seen a lot of changes in the industry, done a lot of cool stuff. What advice would you give for owners? Because I think one of the big questions everybody has is, how are we going to eat this huge elephant, right? Because it's not a want to anymore, it's a have to. So if you had to give some of the owners out there hey, these are things you should pay attention to, what advice would you give them?
I really think I would start with conversations about the business model, because we're already seeing, and we can help with the components in the building, that's very important, but if you don't have a pathway for how you're going to budget it, fund it, or justify it, then it becomes an academic conversation. And we know many friends here who are with technology groups in real estate companies who say, I know what to do, I just can't get the funding to do it. So that's something that holds it up. At least think that through, at least have a beginning of that. You don't have to have the entire thing worked out, but just think how you're going to proceed.
But that's part of your guys' skill set too, right? To help them say, these are different ways you might be able to finance this. Is that part of what you're able to help people do?
That's definitely part of it.
Yeah.
But there's a bigger picture here in that our customers are commercial building owners. And a typical commercial building is owned by more than one investor. And the money that is coming into those buildings now has to be 98% of the time has to show an ESG score. And that ESG score for the commercial building owners that may be listening to this is the GRESB score.
You're not supposed to do the mic drop until after.
Okay, yeah. And so that GRESB score
Yes.
requires investment.
Yes.
And so what we have done is develop a model that allows them to raise that GRESB score at the best economics.
Got it.
And I will add one thing that another simple component that's in this model and discussion, but it can also be out of it. A lot of people are struggling with just how to measure their portfolio carbon accurately, and that's something that sometimes is overthought. And so we're developing a process where you simply plug into the building, every building in your portfolio, and measure the carbon there at the building. And so there are two things you got to do. One is, how am I going to impact it? But also you got to figure out how am I going to measure it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
I was going to say there that one of our foundational things when we think through, right, to Tom's point, is you got to define, measure, to manage.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what we see in built environments is we don't even have the data to go measure. We have been blessed with working with some of the largest portfolios in the world. And it shocks me some of the basic things that are not known about the portfolio, down to square footage. But when we talk about decarbonization, it requires lots of operational technology, and folks don't even know what they got in the building. So you sort of ask, where do you get started? One of the ways to get started is to get an assessment of what you got and look at that as a way of saying what are my gaps are, and that also allows you to address the risks that are introduced by the increasing digitalization inside your space.
Well, yeah, you don't know what you don't know, and that's why you need to talk to professionals, right?
Well, we said earlier, one of our favorite topics, is cybersecurity.
Yes.
And I'll build on what Rob said. If you're going to decarbonize your building, you're going to have a multiple of data and connections and technology, no way around it.
Yeah.
So you can't build on a house of cards. You've got to be cyber secure in order to get there.
And we make it really easy. That's what we learned.
Well, you guys do it, and I've known you guys for years, and again, I think one of the things that cannot be underestimated is the fact that in any organization, you got a lot of different players with different agendas, and it seems like the key thing is how do you get everybody on the same page, and you guys got such a track record of doing that, so applaud you guys for
more
that.
Dr. Phil than technology?
Yeah.
But it starts with end in mind.
You got to have both, yeah.
You got to understand what your goals are.
Right, I got you. Okay, how do people find out about you guys, man? Where do you go?
IntelligentBuildings.com.
All right,
Or Tom's home phone number? Or, no, never mind.
That'll be on your screen. Come on.
All right, listen, guys. So we're going to end this thing with a flare, okay? Since we're the last big interview, so we're not going to actually drop the mics, but we're going to do a virtual mic drop. Hold your virtual mic out. 1, 2, 3,
boom,
and we're done.